Hello, Podsmashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Podsmash,
where gaming goes to grab a beer.
We're your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite.
And tonight we are joined by a special guest, the cricket in Termite's recording studio.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There is a cricket in my basement where we record, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Totally is being picked up by the mic. Yep, that's summer in Virginia for you. You're going to get a cricket every once in a while, sneaks into the house somehow, and then just makes a racket the entire night. So, yeah, go ahead.
We are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games. And tonight we are drinking what?
Beer. I'm drinking my last Flyjack again.
And I am drinking Woodford Reserve.
Fantastic.
Still, it's been a month.
The topic we're talking about tonight is character design. So we've talked about character from like a literary standpoint, like video games as literature and what types of characters show up when it comes to the actual writing of the characters. But tonight we're going to be focusing on things like the design of the characters from like an aesthetic point of view, or from a like how do they make the decisions about the characters. And what we're going to try to answer the question is, how do these characters, or how do they make video game icons, recognizable characters that are brands in and of themselves? Think Mickey Mouse, think Spider-Man, like think the kind of characters that are just instantly recognizable. That's what we're going to be trying to talk about. Oh, maybe. So that's going to be the topic that we're talking about tonight, is character design from a high level perspective. And so we'll get to that though in a bit. We have some segments to get through first. And we want to usually start off talking about the news, unless you wanted to elaborate more on your beer before we go into that.
I'm drinking Woodford Reserve. It's the same thing I've been drinking for like the last 6 episodes.
Okay, great.
It's
so we don't need to...
massive bottle I got. Yeah.
Yep, cool. Awesome. Sweet. Well, then let's just jump right into the news then. So what's goings-ons?
There is a hurricane.
That's right, there is. Well, it's
that's
a tropical
coming
storm.
around.
No, it's a tropical storm. Storm.
All right.
Isaiah.
Sure. But that could knock out the power at any moment, and who knows what that'll do to the show, and who knows what that'll do to your end product, what you're listening to now, because we use post-processing editing skills to make all that look like it's not happening, but it is. So if you notice a sudden interruption or change in our tone or a stumbling to get back to where we were, that's why. And then don't forget our special guest, the Cricket, who may make a comical appearance at any point in
Penguin,
our show.
Termite, and Cricket. Hopefully during an awkward pause. Hopefully after one of us makes a joke, and then we'll swear to you it's not just a sound effect that we're messing with. There is a genuine Cricket who will be trolling us more than likely throughout the episode.
Yep. So that's not the video game world. What's happening in the video game world? Sony just dropped another blog post to everyone who's chomping at the bit about the PlayStation 5 will pick up and echo across the ether ridiculously fast and loud. It was just an update about PlayStation 4 peripherals working on PS5. So I will read these little bullet points. This is directly off the PlayStation blog, written by Isabel Tomatis. Tomatis? I don't know who that is. Which existing PS4 peripherals and accessories will work on PS5? Specialty peripherals such as officially licensed racing wheels, arcade sticks, and flight sticks will work with PS5 games and supported PS4 games. The Platinum and Gold wireless headsets, as well as third-party headsets that connect via USB port or audio jack, will work on PS5, but the headset companion app is not compatible with PS5. The DualShock 4 wireless controller and PlayStation officially licensed third-party gamepad controllers will work with supported PS4 games. Both the PS Move motion controllers and the VR aim controller will work with supported PSVR games on PS5. And at the end, it talks about the camera. The PlayStation camera will work with PS5. For playing supported PSVR games, it will require a PlayStation camera adapter that will be provided at no additional cost to PSVR users. More details on how to get the adapter will be announced at a later date.
Lame.
So anything cool about that?
I want the adapter. I have a PS camera. I want to be able to use it.
Thank you. I thought the same thing.
I was like, everything else makes sense, right? Like PS5 games, you've got to play on the new fancy haptic controller. That makes sense, so that there are enhancements for it. But PS4 games that I'm running backwards compatibly, like, thank you for letting me just use my PS4 controller if I want to. I'm not going to really see a reason for me to, other than if I'm playing a multiplayer game with a friend and it's a PS4 game, that kind of deal. So, but still, it's nice to know that my controller will function on the machine. So, but yeah, everything else I would have expected, more or less. So,
yeah,
I am a little sad though about the PS4 camera only working with an adapter. So, like, how much is that gonna?
It's free.
I thought it was only free for PSVR users.
That's the confusion part. How do they know who's a PSVR user?
Yeah, so is it just going to be a piece that's included with the? Why not just? I hear him.
There he is.
There he is.
The cricket.
Hello, guest cricket.
Right.
It might be the entire time, guys. We are sorry if it's obnoxious. We'll try to reduce it in post processing.
I have bug traps. Like, they're around the basement.
No, there's literally nothing you can do. We don't have a studio, you know what I mean? And even if we did, we'd still be recording remotely. So,
right.
Say lovey. Anyways, awkward cricket pause.
Yep.
What was it talking about? We were talking about peripherals.
The PS camera, you were going to say, why don't they just bundle the adapter in with the PS5?
Yeah, so or just make it universal. Like, make it the same port, the same kind of port type or whatever. I don't know, whatever. We'll see how it ends up happening, so...
Yeah, the only other thing I can think of here, the whole post, the whole reason why this even need to be said is because Xbox came out the gate and said all of the Xbox One controllers are going to work on all the Xbox Ones. And this is like a clarification saying, no, the PS4 will work with PS4 games on the PS5, but you need the DualSense to play anything on PS5, which also makes sense because the haptic feedback. And
I'm sorry, you said all the Xbox One controllers will work on Xbox One. I'm assuming you meant all the
and
Xbox
Series X. I meant,
okay.
All of them.
Just making sure because it's a stupid, confusing naming scheme, and I just want to make sure you said it the right way.
Right. All of the Xbox consoles from the Xbox One through the Series X and whatever in between, any Xbox One controller will fully work the same way across every game. Right. So that's the precedent. That's kind of the landscape that Microsoft has put out. So this is another knock against Sony for being not pro-consumer, which we've talked about at length on the show about how the strategies between Sony and Microsoft are different. They have different entire approaches to the whole thing. Sony is favoring the developer, which will then make great games, and they're moving the entire audience into a new hardware. Xbox is about just play where you are, play on any device you have. We don't want you to buy the new hardware if you don't want to. Everything's going to be backwards and forwards compatible. So this kind of just confirms that more.
Yep, exactly. So, cool.
Crickets.
Yep, crickets. More crickets. All right. So, yeah, peripherals, I think, sound... in both cases, it sounds consistent with the approaches of both consoles. So, but it's some good news and some bad news, I think, for PlayStation players. But most of it, I think, is just generally expected. So, cool. All right. Next piece of news. There was both a sudden rumor/leak and then a quick retraction and then a confirmation of a piece of news today that basically was saying there's been a lot of information in the lead up to the Square Enix Avengers game that's being developed by Crystal Dynamics, and the weird, inconsistent news that I was rumor I was talking about is there. At first, it was a rumor that Spider-Man was going to be coming to as a DLC for the Avengers as a playable character. But only PS4 exclusive. Again, that was quickly retracted by IGN, who originally posted it, and then confirmed by PlayStation hours later. So it is actually a thing. So and it is making waves across the internet. Xbox and PC players are a little salty about it, understandably.
Man, oh man, people are mad.
It's one thing if like Destiny, like releases an exclusive sniper rifle for PlayStation players or whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. That kind of sucks. But it's a single gun. This is like an iconic comic book character, beloved across, nerddom. And I guess it's one thing if like there's an exclusive game by Insomniac, but it's a whole different can of salt when it's like a game that other people will be able to play, and yet they will be locked out of their favorite character potentially because of platform. Wheeling and dealing. So I'm a PlayStation player, so if I'm not even sure I'm going to get the game, and I'm still the jury is still out on whether or not I think it's going to actually be a good game. So I am one of the privileged players to be able to play Spider-Man if I do end up getting it and wanting it. But I guess I do feel kind of bad for Xbox and PC players who, don't get Spider-Man. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to quote the Verge article because he sums it up well. I say he. I don't even know who wrote this. Chaim Gartenberg over at The Verge. He says in a headline, it says that it sucks, this whole situation, and he points out a point that I didn't really think about. What makes it particularly frustrating is that different playable heroes are a key part of Marvel's Avengers, with the specific hero you play and their role in a 4-player team having major impacts on gameplay. As frustrating as exclusive content is, it does make sense given Sony's current strategy for the PlayStation brand as a whole, which has been to focus on PlayStation exclusive games that simply aren't available anywhere else, continuing to push that platform advantage through DLC, especially with a character like Spider-Man that's so tightly tied to Sony as a company. It makes perfect sense for Sony. So I get both sides of that. Like, I understand why it's happening, but the fact that this affects gameplay, and then you asked for my actual thoughts. My actual thought is, what does this mean as far as any story or being fleshed out? It can mean two things: that there's a fully fleshed out Spider-Man story that's exclusive to PlayStation that everyone's missing out on, or Spider-Man is a cheap, shallow character that they've just thrown in that will fill the same void as like Miss Marvel or Black Widow.
Whoa, hold on. Miss Marvel's like a central character.
Well, I mean, like, I'm talking about roles,
gotcha. Sorry,
like party roles. Like, you have a 4-player team, you have a good makeup, you have Iron Man, Thor.
I Kanye'd you. I'm sorry.
Right. Yes. So that's what I meant by, is Spider-Man just going to be a shallow character that's thrown into a role that would normally be filled by an existing character? And I looked at the 6 characters and I chose 2 people that might be what an agile, fast, jumping around character might be, and that was Black Widow and Miss Marvel.
Marvel, yeah.
So, like, one of those 2 things have to happen. And if it's the story fleshed out and a full-blown, like, Spider-Man awesomeness happening, I feel bad for everyone who can't play, the PC players and Xbox who won't get that. Is it a timed exclusive? Will he eventually go to those platforms?
I doubt it. It's Spider-Man so entangled with Sony. Gosh, it's so entangled with Sony. Say that 5 times fast. That I highly doubt he'll ever come to. It would be like Insomniac Spider-Man coming to PC, which probably won't happen.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 was a Switch game, and Spider-Man was on it, and that came out 2 years ago, right before Insomniac Spider-Man did, or right around that time, maybe after.
Yeah, but Marvel's properties, I don't even know how it works, man. Like, part of me would believe it if it was like, well, that's like, that game is based off of the Marvel Comics, so it was like Marvel Comics licensing that must have authorized that, you know what I mean? But I don't know for sure. I don't know how all the rights work. All I
you
can
have
say
Lego
is,
Marvel superheroes, you have Lego Avengers, and Spider-Man's across all those, and that's in all the platforms, PC, Xbox, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Lego has their own licensing deals worked out with all that stuff, so who even knows? But, like, all I can say is that, like, I do agree. I mean, I agree that it does suck. I also agree that I'm worried about it being shallow, because that would suck for everybody then if Spider-Man was just tacked on there as a different skin basically for, you know, Miss Marvel or whatever. Then it would be like, okay, well then that is equally as lame. But we don't even know how the DLC is going to work with story. You know what I mean? Like, are they going to release new characters and each of those characters gets their own little story, like, missions or whatever? I don't know.
Maybe.
I will say,
you know, Hawkeye was announced to be free, right?
Yep, Hawkeye is going to be a post, and Ant-Man had already been confirmed as a maybe not Ant-Man. It was the first Ant-Man, Hank Pym. Yeah, Hank Pym was confirmed. Okay. So, as a DLC character after release as well. So, who even knows, man? The game, I'm jury's out still on the game itself. We had heard earlier this year that industry insiders who had gotten their hands on the alpha of the game said that it was boring, and that kind of was corroborated with some recent gameplay I saw, that it was like from Thor's perspective, and it did look kind of boring. Like, I was like, okay, this is just go beat up robots and then go beat up more robots. But then they just showed off some beta footage because they're about to release the beta, and it actually looked good. Like, it looked like the original, the original stuff they showed off, where, you know, each character seemed like it felt awesome, and the missions looked at least kind of cool, especially playing co-op looked really cool. They announced that you'll have like PC, you can use AI for co-op missions, so you don't have to have a full group of friends just to experience the content. And you could do it with, like, you and I could play, and then the 2 other, you know, characters in the 4-player group could be PC, you know, it could be AIs. So, like, that's kind of cool. So they're doing it. It has potential. I have to wait. This is going to be one of those where I'm going to rely on Metacritic. I'm going to rely on the reviews a little bit harder, because I'm having a hard time judging for myself if it's something that I want to spend $60 on. But
seems like a Anthem situation going on here.
Kind of, but Anthem at least there was at least writing on the wall with Anthem. You know what I mean? Like whereas this game, it's doing all the right things. You know what I mean? Like it's a good, well, I don't know. I can't say for sure. It doesn't feel like it has the same listlessness and slapped together haberdashery that happened with Anthem. It feels like they've had a vision for the entire time, and they don't have to like build a world from scratch or anything like that, or build a game from scratch. They're just like, make it Ultimate Alliance, but from a third-person action RPG perspective as opposed to a top-down isometric. You know what I mean? Like that just kind of seems to be, I don't know. I've heard people say like, this is what we wanted from Ultimate Alliance when we were kids, kind of, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I think it has potential, but it's just going to be one that we'll have to see how it plays. That's why I'm glad they're doing a beta, because I think the people who do want to pre-order it and get in on that will be able to give some insight ahead of time as to whether or not the game is worth looking into. So, I mean, Crystal Dynamics, I love Crystal Dynamics and I love Square Enix, so I'm banking on that. Yep,
I'm with you. Wait till it comes out. Check out the reviews.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts about Spider-Man and Avengers before we move on to...
No, I think we covered it.
Cool. Awesome. We will be doing, as sort of a side note, thank you, Cricket, for your input. As a side note, we'll be doing a episode about superhero games and superheroes in games as a way to celebrate Avengers, whether it's good or not. Whether we're going to end up getting it or not, we're going to use the excuse of a big Avengers game release to talk about superheroes. So it'll be fun.
Yeah.
But that's on the horizon a little bit. But All right. Last piece of news you want to talk about?
Sure. Microsoft confirmed there was a leak. It confirmed it. Halo Infinite's multiplayer will indeed be free to play. I am reading here news published on Eurogamer by Tom Phillips, the news editor there. There's no word on how the mode will be monetized. An earlier report below suggested a battle pass model, or how it fits into other whispers about Xbox Live Gold no longer being required to play free-to-play games on day one, though it would make sense. More details will be shared later, but all we know is a tweet. Halo is for everyone. We can confirm Halo Infinite multiplayer will be free-to-play and will support 120 frames per second on Xbox Series X. More details will be shared later.
Crazy.
That's pretty much it as far as the
great news for Halo players and great news for people who want to enjoy that without having to feel like they're gated by price. There was another rumor that I saw. I don't know if you mentioned this, but there was some...
I just did.
Oh, you did? You said that. Okay. Yeah.
But go ahead and clarify what the rumor was.
It's worth discussing. There is a rumor that they're going to be abolishing Xbox Live altogether. The main thought was that they're going to be bundling it with Game Pass so that you get the entire service for one cost. But the most recent rumor is that they're actually getting rid of it altogether, meaning that all games would be able to be played for free multiplayer without having any additional cost, which puts it more in line with PC. You know, PC internet architecture and infrastructure. You don't need to pay for a service just to play the games. You already pay for that in the form of internet. So I would say that would definitely give it a leg up on PlayStation, because and definitely I think that would, having no longer having that cost, I think more people would be apt to then be like, well, I can get Game Pass and all the games I have on Game Pass I can play with my friends for free. I think it's more, I think that's a very logical route for Microsoft to take. And would definitely make PlayStation Network put some pressure, I think, on PlayStation Network to either provide more with the service or abolish it altogether as well. So if it's just competition pressure, more or less. So I think it's pretty cool if it's just a rumor at this point. So we'll see where they go with it. But
it lines up with Microsoft's strategy in general with cross-platform. They're pushing that heavier than anyone else. They're in their entire console strategy of they're declaring that Xbox One is like a PC, so when you play a game like Halo Infinite, you get the best experience you're going to get, whether you're on Xbox One or Series X. And Phil Spencer has literally compared that to PCs and upgrading how the games look based on the performance of your computer that can handle. And so that talks, you have that, they're comparing it to PC. And then you have this Game Pass, which they're pushing like crazy, subscription model. And then you have, Xbox Live does kind of seem silly when you look at all of that. In the whole grand strategy of what Microsoft is pushing.
It would at least allow them to abolish another stinking logo.
Yeah, no joke. It does beg the question about what about those free games that were only free for players who had Xbox Live, which is just like the PlayStation games that are free for PSN Plus members.
Oh, I see.
I wonder what those old catalog, because I have a whole list of games I claimed when I was an Xbox Live Gold subscriber, will I just free get those?
I would suppose that's the only play at that point, is to just provide them. I've heard that the service has been dwindling, like the games with gold is what they call it, and I've heard that their offerings have been less than stellar and met with lots of criticism lately. To be fair, so has PlayStation's, but yeah, I think that I suppose a lot of players, given that Game Pass is now a thing and it's a relatively affordable solution for games, I would say that most players are probably like, yeah, let's just go with that. Let's just go with an entire library for 1 monthly cost as opposed to whatever this random crap you decide to give me. I think that it would be a smart move, and I think that the only play at that point is to let the people who have been paying for it for so long get it for free. I mean, the only other thing is they could tie it to Game Pass and say, well, they're available on Game Pass now.
Yeah,
but then that would be like taking it from people. I don't know. I think the only play they have there is just give it to people who've already paid for it. You know what I mean? People subscribe loyally for years, so might as well give them their games, their catalog. But
the access to the games goes away when you stop paying. So I have a huge library of games I can't play right now. And the moment I pay for Xbox Live Gold, I have access to those games again. So I like your idea. Just take all of those games and put them on Game Pass. And then
most of them are probably already on Game Pass, but yeah.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
But for existing subscribers who may not have purchased Game Pass yet, I don't know. You see what I mean? Like people who are existing subscribers to Gold that you then say, well, we're basically putting these all, folding this into Game Pass. So to continue access to your games, you now have to pay for Game Pass, which is a more expensive subscription at the moment. Would be kind of crappy. I would just say, just give it to him for free. So I would say that Termite should get all of his games with Gold for free, even though his subscription is lapsed. Would be my argument there. But I don't know.
I know they have a crazy conversion FAQ that you can go see, because there are people who have bought like 3 years of Xbox Live Gold. And I imagine if they do this and they draw that chalk line and they're like, no more games or no more Xbox Live Gold, we're just going to go to Game Pass, they'll probably automatically convert all of your prepaid Xbox Live Gold subscription into whatever the equivalent is of Game Pass and give that to you, and then move all those games to Game Pass or give them to you for free. Whatever they do. We don't know, because it's all rumor and speculation.
Yep, and then having more time to talk about news would be our favorite thing, but also
doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Favorite Things is the next segment of our show, where we talk about the thing that we are most excited about this week and the thing that we are digging in order to share with you something that we're excited about, so that in hopes that you might find your next favorite thing. So, what's your favorite thing, Termite?
My favorite thing was, I'm going to continue pulling on the birthday thread because it was my birthday a couple weeks ago by the time this goes live. My brother, T-Bone, friend of the show, he was a guest on our show, and he's active in our Discord and Twitch streams, gifted me a copy of Paper Mario Origami King, and it is absolutely amazing. I thought it was going to be good. I wanted it because I love Paper Mario, but it's got its hooks in me in a way that I didn't expect. I'm like dying to get back into it. It's totally family friendly. It's ridiculously charming. The art style is phenomenal. I love the paper, and everything is made of paper, cardboard, confetti. It's just so colorful and vibrant. The music is next level, like upgraded to the modern level. Like everything's orchestrated, live band. Like everything about this game is just hilarious, like written and fun, like modern culture references that just doesn't really make sense in a Mario game, but they somehow did it, and it's fantastic. Like I am loving Paper Mario Origami King. The problem with the game is the combat system, which is it's an RPG, so there's a lot of combat. It makes up a lot of my time, but it has this weird system where you line the enemies up in a line or in a cluster so that you can stomp on them or smack them with your hammer, respectively, and it's not fun, and you don't get experience from it. And it's kind of frustrating, and you just want to skip
90% of the game is just absolutely horrible, but the rest of it's great. That 10% makes up for it.
Like, but I'm still into it, and I don't know how many hours I've put in, probably like 10. Like, I'm not super deep into it yet, but I want to play it more. The exploration is great. You have to like find these toads that are hidden around, solve these little puzzles in the world, but the combat system is just dry, and you don't get experience like you normally do in an RPG. You just get coins, and you can then use those coins to buy accessories to upgrade your character. So you're sort of like, there's an in-game currency system that doesn't really need to be there, but that's how you level your character up, so to speak, just by getting better gear. So it's kind of okay. It makes me want to stay in the fights long enough to collect the gold. But other than that, the boss fights are nuts. And that actually makes the combat system fun because there's way more depth with the combat in a boss fight than there are with the enemies. With the enemies, you just line them up. With the boss fights, you have these, it's like a board game, and you have to line the spaces up that tell you which direction Mario's going to go and different action icons and stuff. And so there's like this dynamic aspect of things happen and change the shuffle after you've lined them up. And like, it causes you to think. I struggle immensely in the boss fights. Like my brain just doesn't do this the way that the game lets you. And so I struggle. I like die. It's totally different. So there's like this difficulty spike with the boss fights. And then the rest of the game, you just kind of coast through and enjoy it. But
Cool.
It's fantastic. I love it. I highly recommend it.
Nice. Mine is also a recommendation kind of favorite thing. Because some of our favorite things are like, oh, this is just an interaction I enjoyed with my family. So like, I guess get a good family and like what's the recommendation there? Right. There's not one. So this one is more of a recommendation. This is something that you can go out and consume and enjoy. Me and my wife have been watching a show called Mr. Robot, and I don't know if I mentioned it as my favorite thing before because we're a couple seasons into it now, so we've been watching it for a few months. But we're on season 3 now, and we're coming up on the end of it, and I'm ticked off because season 4 is not yet on Amazon, and apparently the show ends phenomenally on season 4 is the last season. And so we're right coming up on we actually have only one episode left of season 3, and we would have watched it tonight if it wasn't for this darn podcast I had to record. Just kidding. But seriously, yes, it's a very good show. It's got Rami Malek in it, Christian Slater, and it basically is a hacker show. But the cool thing about the show, one of the cool little tidbits is that all of the hacking is legit. Like it's not just made up stuff. We have to loop the feedback routing into the malware. Like it's none of that. It's actual legitimate. Like if they mention malware, it's because they have legitimately coded malware and like designed the actual real life hack. And the coolest thing is that all of the hacks on the computer screens are again legit. They're using things like putty. They're using things like command line. They're actually like writing code, and they have stunt hackers on the show to actually do the hacking.
Nice.
So all the hacks are actually done by all the actual things you see on the screen are done by real people, real professionals. And I guess they would technically be security. They wouldn't necessarily be stunt hackers. They would be security, computer security experts.
Ethical hackers.
But, yeah, exactly. And so everything's done for real, and then they just superimpose it onto the they have Rami Malek behind the computer instead of the stunt hackers. So it's a really, really cool show, really interesting. Second season does drag a little bit, I will admit, but third season is just incredible. So
what is this show called again?
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot.
Yeah, USA, the USA Network, like the.
Huh.
I think of USA as like TBS, just like a janky network with like third-rate shows. But no, They have this incredible show, Mr. Robot, and they apparently have had it for a few years now. And like I've heard about it and I've seen good things about it. But it was our colleague Charlie Bowman, shout out Charlie from our church, who kind of like hit the nail. Like I've heard other people recommend it, but he was like, "Dude, it sticks the landing." And I was like, what? A show sticking the landing? A show that's actually good? That ends well? What is this? So I had to check it out, though. Yep. Yeah. But I think you'd like it, too, because you're a computer IT professional.
Yeah, sounds good.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool.
We subscribed to HBO Max because we wanted to watch the various things that are on there.
Yeah.
All of Studio Ghibli stuff is there. All Sesame Street's there. And there's a million other things we want to watch. But one of those things is Westworld.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, Doctor Who's there too.
You should watch it. You should watch it.
I should watch it. And Westworld, season 3. So we started it up. I have no clue what's going on. Nothing. I need to go and do some research. That show, wow. The first episode was awesome, but I don't know anything about it. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Fair enough.
That's good.
Cool. All right. Well, that leads us to our last segment for our main topic, which is DLC. DLC is a segment of our show where we have a fun side discussion that may or may not have anything to do with our main topic. Tonight's does. We are talking about character design. So I wanted to talk about the fictional Penguin and Termite video game. What is their iconic character design? How do we take Penguin and Termite, put them in a video game, and then make those characters iconic? So that, Penguin and Termite are in Smash Bros. 7.
Ooh, this could be an entire topic in and of itself.
Pretty much.
Put together.
Oh, for sure. So to simplify it, I already kind of came up with like a game, like, because we could spend just time talking about what would a Penguin and Termite game look like and talk about the game design.
Right.
So I'll just say, let's just say like Darksiders Genesis, where it's the top-down isometric action RPG, and with two, like the intention is you play two co-op characters, Penguin and Termite, solving puzzles, fighting baddies.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the character design look like? My immediate thought is, so we riff off of our logo, right? Because we already have people who are watching can just already see our logo. So we already have two characters fully realized by the magnanimous Tristan Napotnik. But there's still a lot of gaps in there. What do so we kind of have a basic look for the characters, but what does our equipment look like? What are the personalities of Penguin and Termite like? These are some of the things that we'll be hitting on that flesh out character design. So take it away. I've talked enough. What are your thoughts?
So my first thought is myself, because I'm just, we all are narcissists at some level, right? So what kind of character would I be? I'm thinking of a paladin tank, but moves really fast and throws bombs. So AoE damage, moves very quickly, and has like the rule following, like holy aspect of, but not holier than thou, but like rule, like what is it? Shadowbreaker? Is that what I am?
What now?
In your Sanderson thing?
What? You're a Skybreaker, sorry.
Thank you. Skybreaker.
I was like, what?
What?
Sanderson?
Yeah, it tells you how well I know the orders.
I thought you were talking about Darksiders at first. I was like, what?
No. What? But the idea of like following laws, following rules, I'm a very administrative person, and like I'm very upholder in my personality, and so it's like I have this almost paladin-esque caricature of myself. But of course, I'm the Termite.
I was gonna say, I imagined Termite a little bit more as like a tinker. I totally 100% with your character. You're the actual personality of Termite. He's like a rule follower, but I also imagine him like scuttling around and like hacking into things with his multiple arms. Like, and maybe again, it's maybe because I'm just thinking about Mr. Robot, but I totally think of him, again, you are a programmer. So I imagine like going up to terminals and like typing in things. Also, like, meanwhile, he has 6 arms. So like 2 of his arms have guns. So he's both hacking at the same time as like gunning down enemies from behind. And then Penguin is the one who's just like, he's got our friend Tristan drew him with the like headband, so he's just like flippers out, just like punching the crap out of people with his flippers, pecking them with his beak. He's just a melee brawler, all up in the face. So you have the melee and the ranged, totally just like stealing he's being more of the tank in regards to stealing all the attention and the spotlight, while Termite runs around and just like hacks the crap out of everything.
I'm thinking of like a mix between Maz Kanata. No, is that her?
Yeah, from with the glasses.
And she's like, and she's flying in that hologram, and like, hang on one sec, I can't talk right now. And she's like having battles and flying with the huge goggles, and Rocket Raccoon.
Yes,
like mix those two kind of caricatures
like the
together.
Personality, the kind of morality of Maz Kanata, but the sort of just like scrappiness of Rocket Raccoon. Meanwhile, Penguin is like a mix between like he's I'm gonna pull from Sanderson and just say wit, you know what I mean? Like just like the cracking jokes, but also in kind of but unlike wit, he's like in the fray of things, just like pay attention to me while Termite hacks.
So it's a mixture of I don't know character names. I'm horrible. What's the main character of Galaxy? Wow,
Star-Lord,
Avengers. Thank you, Star-Lord. Wow, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the main character of Firefly.
Yes, yes, Malcolm Reynolds, Star-Lord. Yes, I could get it. Yep.
Mix those two. Yeah.
Yep. Chris Pratt and Nathan Fillion. Yep, totally. That's Penguin. Mm-hmm. I love it. That's our character designs for our fictional video game that one day someone can design for us. I'm thinking Insomniac. We got Insomniac on board. We give them a pitch.
Do it.
Come on, Insomniac.
It's not Ratchet and Clank. It's Penguin and Termite.
Penguin and Termite.
That's right. Top down, isometric. Yep.
Yeah, hack and slash RPG, puzzle solving game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Kid friendly, obviously, family friendly, but like, that's it. Insomniac. Like we'll take royalties. We'll take our royalty checks made out to Penguin and Termite LLC.
It will sell lots of copies.
Totally. It will go down as like the 3rd greatest video game of all time. It's happening.
3rd.
All right. So that's DLC. If you have thoughts as to what you think Penguin and Termite video game character design should look like, if you have a whole different vision for what our video game should be, or if you have your own gamer handle that you have strong vision for what you think a character design of your handle would look like, the character that your handle represents, then by all means, please share that with us. There are tons of ways you can interact with us and tell us, engage with us on this DLC so that we can all generate and have this fun discussion together. So, Termite, where can the Podsmashers of the internet find us if they want to share their DLC ideas with us?
First off, if you want to find all of their podcast platforms, you can go to 80bitpodsmash.com. It's actually a very newly minted HTTPS
Spice. The S is for
spice
melange.
And security, 80bitpodsmash.com. That was a lot of work. So you can go there, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where there are links to all of our podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. I think I said Spotify a bunch of times, but we're everywhere you want us to be. And if we're not, we'll put ourselves there. That's to get our weekly show. It goes live every Monday at midnight. If you want to continue to interact with us on a deeper level, you can find us on social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. We have a subreddit. We have tag us at 80BIT Podsmash. So you can hit us up on any of those platforms and start a conversation. We have a Discord server whose link is in all of our social media posts and our show notes. So if you go to our podcast website, you can find the link to Discord in the show notes. If you go to our Facebook page, you can find the link to our Discord in every episode post. There's also links somewhere on our bios for all of these platforms. And then every single week, on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we stream live on Twitch. We play whatever game we feel like playing. Sometimes we play together. Sometimes we just play what we're digging. So you can hit us up on twitch.com/80BIT Podsmash. No uppercases, no hyphens or funny businesses, just 80-bit Podsmash.
Huzzah! Great. We got that spiel out of the way. So we are talking about character design tonight, obviously. So some of the things that we talked about in designing our characters are probably going to give you good ideas to the types of things we're talking about. So let's kind of start. Let's start with kind of what is character design, but then we'll pivot. Instead of going too deep into a discussion of what character design is, we'll talk about it from which comes first. What is kind of the difference between game design and character design, and when designers sit down to make games, where do they start? Do they start with designing the type of game it is, or do they start with the character, or do they do both? So let's start there. What is character design, and what distinguishes it from other kinds of design?
I don't really have a definition, but character design is designing the characters that exist in a game, whether it's the player character or the NPCs, and that goes from dialogue, visuals, obviously, animations, dialogue, interacting with the environment, animations, and fleshing out what a character is. If you just focus on the characters themselves, every aspect of the character, that's part of character design. And we're going to break down all the different aspects of character design later in our discussion. Yeah,
when I think of character design, one of my favorite immediate thoughts is a quote from a show called Community, which I've talked about. I know I've talked about it on the podcast before, but in the very first episode, there's a character he's a lawyer. He's known for his smooth talking and be able to convince people of anything. But he has this speech, and he's like, the reason that you all can get along is the same reason why I can take this pencil. He grabs a pencil from someone. He says, I can take this pencil. I can tell you its name is Gary, and then I can do this. And he breaks it over his leg. He goes, and a little piece of you will die on the inside. Is because human beings can connect with anything. It's the lesson
nice.
There. And it's true. I mean, when you think about it, like, every game has a character, even if that character is just the Z brick in Tetris. Like, we assign personalities to those bricks in Tetris because we hate some of them we hate so much or love so much. Like, oh my gosh, you saved me, I brick or whatever you call the whatever your particular configurations. And that's because like every game has some medium with which to interact, that you as the player interact with, and we tend to think of those as characters. Some of them are more straightforward, like Sonic and Mario, they're actual personalities, but some of them are maybe less so. But at the very end of the day, you're controlling something, and we tend to think of those things as characters. So the design, the choices that go into making those things are in many ways as important as, the rest of the game and are a huge part of the game, but they're distinguished by the fact that you're not just designing what type, it's not really a conversation about genre. It's not really a conversation about assets, particle effects, graphics, or things like that. It is literally you're basically building a character from the ground up. It includes writers, it includes artists, it includes marketing people even, you want your character to be marketable. So in many ways, in some of the bigger companies, they'll have marketing experts say, well, is that marketable? And it involves as many levels of game design as the game itself. So I think that would be my explanation of it. But so in that vein, then kind of how do you if you're designing a game, how do you start? Do you start with the character, or do you start with the game and let the character come out of the game?
I would always put gameplay first. I think what defines a video game is the gameplay mechanics, the gameplay feel, and the art style all kind of mar into this what the game is. And this comes out a lot in our critiques about new game announcements, such as Everwild from Rare. We know what the tone is and the art style of the game, and we see the characters even, and we're speculating that it's a 4-player co-op game. We just talked about this in our Xbox Game Showcase. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to that episode and hit that up. But what we saw was an overemphasis on the character and nothing about the game. I'm not sold yet because I want to know what the game is. I want to know how it feels. What is it? Is it a platformer? Is it an open world exploratory action RPG? What is the game? Mm-hmm. And I think in the history of video games, the video games that have good gameplay are the ones that are the most renowned. I think characters flesh that out. Characters will add to what the game is. So you can have a game that's really, really, really good with shallow characters, but then how hooked, what are the legs on that game? How long is it going to last in the market? Are you going to be able to sustain an audience over time, which seems to be kind of the strategy of most game developers today, is using DLC and other monetization strategies. They want to keep the legs on these games lasting forever, except for Sony with their first-party single-player, very character-strong games, which we'll talk about that too. It's a good contrast to what I'm talking about. But take Overwatch, which is a great example of taking an arena shooter like Team Fortress 2, which had blank characters, and adding depth and characters to them, and you get Overwatch. So you can see what character design adds to games when you have Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch next to each other. Rip the characters out, and they're so similar, but they're both ridiculously good and super addicting and have crazy good, deep audiences that continue to engage in the game forever.
Yep. Well, I would say, and I would argue that you are right you are 95% right. The only 5% I take issue with is, or I would disagree with, is I think there are plenty of games out there that do design with the character first, but in every case I can think of, it is because the character has already existed in a franchise. So, for example, I think the best example I can give on that is Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus. You have an existing character of Vincent Valentine, and it seems like that entire game was designed, the gameplay and everything, all the decisions were made off of we've got this strong character of Vincent, let's make a game. Let's make a Vincent game. But even good examples of every Mario game that's designed since the first Mario game has had to grapple with the fact of, how do we make this a Mario game? You're designing a game based off of this character that has pre-established traditions, if you will, and everything flows out of that. It may be less obvious in the direct sequels like Mario 2 and 3, but definitely with, when they had to make the jump to 3D, they're like, how can we honor the tradition of this character while still making the jump to a whole new space? And I think that you can see that with lots. I could give tons of examples of games that are character. Sonic is a great, Sonic and Sonic Adventure and stuff like that. They had to design these games after this. You can see it so many decisions from the music to the other characters. All the other characters in the game are designed with the same feel as Sonic because they have this strong character and they have to design a game that honors that character. So it really does influence game design heavily when you have these pre-established characters. And I'm sure I could pull up examples of new IPs where they're like, let's make a character that's this, and then figure out what that game world is like. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. But I think it does happen. I think both do happen. I think sometimes they start with the game and they, Sonic was, we talked about in our Sonic episode, continuing off of him as an example. His first games, Sonic the Hedgehog, they went through all kinds of iterations because they were trying to figure out what game they wanted to make. They were trying to make the game, and they were like, well, how do we make the kind of game that we're trying to make sense, and how do we make a character that makes sense with it. So it, I think it does happen, both ways. But
yeah, at the start of both of those examples, Mario was not an emphasized character at all.
Right, it was all about Donkey Kong.
Yeah, it was Jumpman. Like, he was just this not even, who cares, right? It was about Donkey Kong. And then you had Mario 1 came out, and that's like solidified Mario as a Nintendo character, and it also solidified what kind of games and what role he'll play in those games for the rest of his entire franchise existence, minus the spin-offs like Mario Party and Mario Strikers, etc. And then you have Sonic. Sega was trying to compete with Nintendo. We want to take what was successful with Mario, and that is a side-scrolling platformer, and we're going to jazz it up. We're going to make it fast-paced and break the rules and go crazy with it. We want a character that fits that. So they came up with Sonic that was appealing to North American young teenage boys. And then once that was established, so the game came first, the character was added to fit the game, and then it started a franchise with which they then made games based on and around Sonic as a character. So it was almost like the game itself was first, set up the character, and then all future entries in that franchise were always linked back to the fundamentals of the character. So then it was like spawning a new franchise, and that's what's unique about Final Fantasy. You talked about Dirge of Cerberus. Dirge of Cerberus existed because Final Fantasy VII existed. Cloud did not exist because Final Fantasy VII existed. Mm-hmm. Final Fantasy VII existed because Square Enix and Sakaguchi wanted to make a story that was all the things that Final Fantasy VII is about, and that's so much depth and about environmentalism and terrorism, and I could go on a whole entire podcast rant about what Final Fantasy VII is about, but the only reason why Dirge of Cerberus
gods
existed,
summoning meteors to all that good stuff.
Yeah, neat things. Like Dirge of Cerberus existed because Final Fantasy started it, so it's almost like the games don't wrap around the characters until the characters have already been established,
right?
Which goes back to my original definition of saying game design comes first. So you design a new game, a new IP with characters in it, and then from there, the franchise entries in sequels or spin-offs of that original game are then going to focus on the characters, and the games would be designed around them. Mm-hmm. We definitely went on a tangent.
Totally.
We took a sidestep, but
yeah. So let's merge these.
Interesting trend.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and let's merge these next two questions. Kind of talk about what. Yeah. So let's break down character design. What are some of the elements that feed into character design, and what are you shooting for when you are trying? So what should game developers shoot for? Why is it important for them to design characters? What's the goal? What's the end goal?
The end goal of designing a video game character is to boost, support, run alongside the story or the atmosphere or the game design you were trying to convey.
Yeah, it's primarily meant to augment that, for sure, for sure. It's meant to kind of enhance the experience of the game, and make you, get based on what your goals are for the game, right? So it should line up with the goals of the game. If you're trying to tell a very deep, emotional story, you want a character that is deep and emotional and makes you, and has a character journey and makes you feel things. If you want a game that's fun, cartoony, and poppy, then you want a game that, and a character that's ultimately, you don't want a character that's super deep and tortured. You want a fun, shallow, happy, exciting character to get you into it. But a sort of a side goal, I think, of character design is, I think every game developer wants their game to be wildly successful, right? They want to make more sequels. They want to make more games. Part of that is coming up with a character that becomes iconic.
Yep.
And so we're going to use, in tandem with this idea of character design, you're going to hear us use this word of video game icons or iconic. And these are, like we were saying earlier, these are your Tony Starks, your Mickey Mouses, your
Master Chief,
Indiana Joneses. I'm pulling from non-video game examples for people who, just to say, like, those are icons of, cartoons and Disney and Marvel and comic books and all that stuff. So they happen in video games too, because there's not a single person on the planet who doesn't recognize the mustache and baseball cap with the M on and the plumber's outfit, and that is Mario. Right. You know what I mean? Like, that is an iconic character design. That character has become an icon in our culture, and that's kind of the goal. That's the end goal. That's the sort of measure of success, right? Is if your characters become iconic, if they become household names, then you've won character design, if you will.
Yep. And there's different degrees of that too, because there's like Assassin's Creed has Ezio. He's a character that's sort of iconic. He exists in some of the game's entries in the franchise, but then they switch to whoever the character is in the new games. They're actually different ones each time. And then you have like Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2 and Part 1. Like Ellie became iconic in just 2 games. And then you have like Master Chief. That's obviously Halo. That's Xbox. That's Microsoft.
Yeah.
It's interesting the different degrees of iconicism, if that's even a word.
Iconography is the word you're looking for.
Yeah. And then so like you have different like stuff that grabs people for who they are, and then you have one-off entries like Days Gone. I don't know who Deacon Jones. I don't even know his name. I have no clue who the main character of that game is. I know him by his face. Like if I saw the cover of the game, I'd be like, oh, it's Days Gone, or like the main character of Gears of War. I don't remember his name. And there's 5 games in the series. I've played 4 of them. And I don't know his name, but
Marcus. Is it Marcus?
Marcus yeah. Phoenix. That's it.
Marcus
Thank
Phoenix.
You.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
also, like name, and there's that's a great point because let's break it down. Breaking down some of the elements. What are these things that go into character design? And one of the first things, just like we had an episode a few weeks ago about, how important it is the name of the actual game itself. The name of the title of your game is super important. And we broke down all these examples of great games that have terrible titles or great games that have great titles, but that same logic applies to character design as well. You gotta have a good name. You gotta have a memorable name, and you gotta have a name that will stick. As much as I love Ghost of Tsushima, and as much as I like the character of Jin Sakai, I promise you, I will forget that character's name eventually. You know what I mean? Because, part of it is a cultural thing. It's not a name that I experience on a regular basis as part of my culture. But it's also just, it's meant to be kind of a generic feudal Japanese samurai name. So that's not to say that there may be people who, Jin Sakai does leave an indelible mark on, but, it's different for each person. But there are characters, I think you mentioned that, like, who's the main character in Onimusha? Like,
right.
I don't know. Great, wildly successful game, but like, who even knows? So yeah, name is a very important part of it. In addition to names, there's what does the character look like? What is their style, their design? I think you pulled from an article, the Game Sutra article or whatever, and you talk about like your character should be recognizable as a silhouette. My immediate thought with that is like your character, you should know what character it is when you see Challenger approaching in Smash Bros.
Right,
like
that's exactly what I was thinking of when I said silhouette. And the article goes into talk about, and hopefully I'll remember to link off to it. It's from 2015. It's a long time ago by Michael Saba. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but silhouette is important because like if you have a character with a sword and that sword doesn't stick out past his hip, behind him or in front of him or her, that you're not going to see the sword, so that character won't have that iconic look because there's no sword. So you think of like Prince of Persia or a pirate game. Pirates have like peg legs and hook arms and the kind of stylized top hat that you would think of a pirate. So if you're designing a pirate character and you don't do the silhouette correctly, then that can throw off the iconic look of what a character does. And the same goes with the pose of the character, how you pose it in its artwork. And so in the manuals online, on your website, social media, etc., that's what marketing people are for. And the artists work together to come up with good poses that kind of dictate the character's stature. Is this character confident? Is this character timid? Is it character heavy and big and has this like emboldening stance and presence?
That makes me think of this. In our stage combat days, we would talk about, is your character a fighter or are they not a fighter? Because that will dictate their posture and stuff like that. Like the way you embody the character, like does this character, so that, the same thing goes here for character design. Are they fighters or are they not? Because so much is going to be informed by that. Because even if they're fighting and even if they win the fight, the way they win the fight and their movements all going to be determined by. So yeah, how does the character move? How does the character feel to play and get behind?
And I guess because he's fresh on my mind, I'm thinking of the perfect example of those two things, silhouette and poses, is Spider-Man. You know everything about who Spider-Man is based on like his poses. Yeah, you know he's agile, he's thin, but he's not like weak. You can tell he's got muscle definition. He's got rounded arms and thighs and quads and calves. And his
design, it's so unique. Like you can see a silhouette of Spider-Man and know you're looking at Spider-Man because the character has been drawn so well for years with a very unique posture, or pose, I guess. Like, the Spider-Man pose. I don't even have to describe it, and I say Spider-Man pose, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yep. And you don't have to see his costume, anything. You saw a silhouette of Spider-Man in that pose, you know who it was.
Mm-hmm. And then in video games, do they act the part? So if you have a timid, very thin, non-combative character, but can kill an enemy in one punch, that doesn't line up. It's like, what?
Right.
Sometimes RPGs get this wrong, especially in some of like the Elder Scrolls games, where you see this frail, tiny, thin, old, like elfish looking thing that's shorter than you and comes up to you and knocks you out in one hit. And you're like, what? How did that happen? Like, that's dumb. It doesn't line up. And there's no amount of like text, lore, or explanation that doesn't change that feel or that juxtaposition that you see. And so to make a good character, to flesh out, it all kind of builds together. It's the visuals, it's the stance, the pose, the look of the character, and how he's or she is presented in the game is going to help and communicate in a non-verbal way what this character is and what they convey and who they are.
Yeah, and
give them personality.
Absolutely, yeah. And that personality is important because it very much... And then in some cases, you want that juxtaposition. I mean, you want... Sometimes, as long as it's intentional and it's done for style purposes, it can be done well. I think of, like, for example...
Tonberries?
Or even, like, I think of the gnomes in World of Warcraft, where, like, there were so many people who complained for so long that they were, like... how can they be warrior tanks? How can they, how can you have a dragon throw a punch at a gnome and the gnome takes the hit? It's like, well, the design there was intentional. It's because it's like, oh yeah, because the feel of gnomes we want is the feeling of being the small, tiny person holding your own against a massive dragon. Yeah. And they justified it by the fact that, like, they're super smart. And so they can, like, calculate the right angles of force required to blah, blah, blah. But again, that's all, as long as you give a reason for it, that's justifying. But it can definitely still can cause that juxtaposition. But personality has everything to do with it. Like, and again, you definitely don't want that juxtaposition in a serious game like The Last of Us. You wouldn't want Ellie to, like, take someone's head and, like, bash their skull into a wall because she's Ellie. She's tiny. She's this, you can't imagine her taking, like, a 6'5" dude's face and smashing it through a brick wall. Abby, on the other hand, you can't imagine that because she's huge. She's this big, intimidating character. And so it makes sense for her. And they did a pretty good job in Last of Us Part 2 of having those two characters feel different to play. When you're playing as Ellie, you feel like you're this scrappy, setting traps and laying in wait and all that stuff. Whereas when you're playing Abby, you're all confident going in there and just bashing skulls.
And Abby even had, like, slower movement. When you sprinted with her, it was like clunk, 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 clunk as her footprints would smack the floor because she weighs more. She's more muscular. And Ellie is more fast and sprinty flighty, and more agile and flighty, And so just even in how they feel, if you had no weapons and you just meleeed everyone, they would feel totally different. And that's a great example of fleshing out that, do they fit the part? Do they act the part character kind of design that you want in a fighting game or any video? Sorry, I looked at Mortal Kombat on my shelf and I immediately said fighting game and my brain just went there. So now I'm thinking, that brings that's I want to talk about fighting games. You mentioned how you are familiar with Mortal Kombat. Like, I say Sub-Zero, you know exactly who I'm talking about. It's like super iconic because he's a character, he's a ninja, he wears blue, he's cold, he has a dark past that fleshes out his lore, his history lines up with why he would be good with ice because he's cold, and his fighting styles and everything complements the fact that he can freeze the enemies and trap them, and those kind of tactics all build into his character, who he is. And that's fantastic. And Mortal Kombat does a great job of doing that with all of their characters.
And I like Mortal Kombat as an example too, because you have, there's like 3 or 4 characters that are all ninjas that are essentially just recolored versions of each other. And yet I know them all. It's Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Reptile, and there is one more I'm blanking on right now.
There's a few more. There's Noob Saibot, there's Smoke, Ermac, Rain.
So some of those guys have a little bit different design. So I think the 3 primary ones, though, are the yellow Scorpion, the blue Sub-Zero, and the green Reptile that all have the same. Like, again, they're recolors of each other. And yet they're also distinct because you have Reptile, and they did that in the movement and everything and the backstory. But you did bring that up. One of the other things that goes into character design, aside from the look and personality of the character, is that's when you bring in the writing and say, like, here's the story, here's their background, here is how their character development works. And that's all the stuff we talked about in the video game lit portion, but you got to give them a sort of a context that helps flesh out their character. And again, it can be as shallow as, this plumber saves Princess Peach, and that's just his thing. That's his shtick. Is he always is saving this woman, or it could be as deep as this character was a ex-soldier of a super military group infused with radioactive magic, and he now has lost his memory, has lost parts of his memory, and is now joining a eco-terrorist group. You know what I mean? Like I'm describing Cloud here and very badly, but
no, that's fine. I knew exactly what you were talking about.
It's a very rich backstory that but that all of that serves the character design to help give you the feel of the character. And then and that can be everything from stock characters that we talked about in our episode about character from a literary perspective. So it could be the fact, like, sometimes you want to pick a stock character for your characters, or sometimes you want to pick a more 3-dimensional character. Like I think of again, all those Naughty Dog games, Last of Us and Uncharted. They want their character to be a little bit more 3-dimensional, or characters, I should say, to be more 3-dimensional than just this one's the bad guy and this one's the jokester, So, and then the last kind of piece of character design that I think is important is the equipment, the accessories. What do you put on them? What do they use? It's one thing to say this character wields a sword, but like so many swords look all the same, especially in video games. So like giving them a unique looking sword. The Buster Sword was a great, again, we're picking on Final Fantasy a lot, but the Buster Sword is an iconic video game weapon for an iconic character, and even Masamune, Sephiroth's sword is like, those two go hand in hand of like, you think of them, what they look like, if you've played those games before, immediately what they are, what they do, and who uses them, because they're an extension of that character.
And you think of like Mega Man's arm, like is the Buster Cannon, right?
Yep.
That's like, or the Buster arm, I don't even know what it's called, but it's iconic. Like you just know, you see it, done. Doom, BFG 9000.
Oh, yeah.
You know what that is. The gravity gun in Half-Life, like the Blades of Chaos from God of War.
Yep.
Like you have all the Keyblade from Kingdom Hearts. Like these are all iconic accessories and equipment that you would think of. And you immediately tie it to the character who wields it. And yeah, that's totally, it helps flesh out the personality of the character. Like the BFG 9000 in Doom makes perfect sense, because what is Doom? The game itself is you are a lonely, brooding demon hunter, ex-military, like person stranded on Mars, hunting down demons with rock and roll music blaring. It's loud, it's violent, ridiculously gory, and what better gun to suit that personality than a gun that clears an entire room in one shot with a massive green ball?
Right, right.
And you wouldn't want blows everything up.
When you put a character on a poster or you're trying to sell something, this is kind of where the marketing comes into play. Like those accessories and those equipment that's all. You wouldn't want to put Link on the front of a poster with him not holding anything. You know what I mean? Like it's just, okay, he's an elf in a tunic. Like it's that shield, and that's the Master Sword again is such a classic look, and the Hylian shield is even more iconic, I think, than the Master Sword, because everybody knows what that thing looks like, and everybody associates it with Zelda, and everyone associates it with Link, and to another extension too, like things like the heart pieces in Zelda, the Pokeballs, the rings in Sonic, the mushrooms in Mario. These are all accessories and other pieces that go hand in hand, making you are meant to immediately associate it with the characters that they're associated with. So cool.
One other aspect of character design that's not on this list is the idea of a silent character, that you are the character, like it's designed as such that the player imprints themselves onto that character, like a mute RPG player, or kind of what Master Chief was in the early days of Halo.
Joker in Persona is meant to be that as well, even though he ends up having, but he has very few lines, and you're kind of you pick all of his lines throughout. You have the dialogue choices, right? So it's meant to be you who's making who's driving his brain, basically. Even Link is that, because Link has no dialogue. So even though Link is in many ways an iconic looking character, he also is a mute character that's meant to be bland enough for you to kind of make him, embody him enough as well. And that's a long standing tradition.
It is. And Bethesda's Elder Scrolls and Fallout games, where you kind of create your own character, you create the look and feel of your own based on the options the game gives you and how you imprint yourself on it. Like I used to always make myself. In Fallout 4, my character is myself. And I got bored with that, and I decided to start making in like Outer Worlds, you have a character creator. I was like, I don't want to be a white dude. I want to be something not white and not guy. So let's mix up stuff. Am I going to be an Asian girl, or am I going to be an Asian transgender person?
I like I was just setting
Asian,
a woman. You said I'm going to be a not guy.
Right. Yeah. Well, because it could be any combination of like transgender stuff. I want to represent them too. Like it could be anyone. It could be anything. It's not me. Like
customizable characters are almost a beast unto themselves. In fact, they are. We had an entire conversation about customizable characters and how we approach how the different ways to approach that are. But yeah, it's they are a part of character design. They are a conversation of like, how do we design the rest of the characters around the game to kind of be able to interact with a character that could be it's a blank slate. It could be anything and anyone. So that is definitely an important part of it as well. But because I mean, we barely have scratched on NPCs as well, because NPC non-player character design is equally as important. Like Sonic is nothing without Eggman. Mario is nothing without Bowser or Donkey Kong. You know what I mean? Like the villains and then also the non-player characters, the sidekicks, Tails, and all that stuff. Are all intentionally, purposefully designed characters that those conversations are equally as important as the main characters too. But we could go more into that, but we are running out of time. I wanted to spend some time talking about what are some of the pitfalls of character design. What are some things that should be avoided and that we have seen not done so well in character design before, some easy mistakes to make that in some cases can be even harmful to video games altogether.
Piggybacking off what I said earlier, tokenism. Tokenism is horrible. Tokenism is when you do the bare minimum to include a minority character, black, gay, Latino, female, transgender, etc. in your game, and you just call it a day without even considering what purpose that character serves other than populating the game world to vary the background.
I think of like just Left 4 Dead immediately, where it's like, here's the girl character. Here's the one girl character of like the 4 primary playable characters. Even Borderlands is, like as much as I love Lilith, it's like in the first Borderlands game, it's like, here's the girl.
Right. And we're seeing an evolution of that definitely in the current generation, but like the Borderlands generation was last gen, and a lot of last gen PS3, Xbox 360 era games definitely did this. They just phoned in a minority character and that was it, and moved on. So don't do that, because just for the sake of diversity.
Yeah, and tokenism goes hand in hand with just stereotypical characters. Stereotyping is just like, here is clearly the black character because, quote, everyone knows what black people are like. Again, that is a statement that I said I tried to laden as much sarcasm in as possible because it's a very flawed way of thinking, but it is something that happens all the time where it's just like, well, here's the stereotypically black character, or here's the stereotypically gay character, here's the stereotypical girl character, and there are so many examples, and we talked a lot about them in we talked a lot about the female ones in our episode on strong female characters, but like Princess Peach is kind of a stereotypical girl character with not a lot of depth to her, and stereotypes should be avoided but are tragically heavily present in video game history. Like I don't even have to start pulling out a list. There's so many. There's so many bad stereotypes in games.
There is. And when you mix the two, stereotyping and tokenism together, you're most likely going to find racism or sexism or ageism. Like you're going to find some offensive content that is offensive to a certain group of people, and you don't want to do that.
And minimizing to a certain group of people, for sure. Yep.
What kind of message are you conveying in having that in your game? For one, what does it say about yourself as a writer and as a game producer, as a studio? But two, you're ostracizing your market base. You're just gonna be like, I don't want to market to these people. Well, why not? They're people too, and it just looks bad all around. And it's poor taste. So don't support those games.
Yeah. Another pitfall I've noticed with game design, with game character design, is it's twofold. It's like two ends of the spectrum. Like, it's important that if you want to create an icon, like we were talking about before, it's important that your characters stand out. But there's kind of two pitfalls there, right? Like, there's one pitfall of like the character, they're designing the character too much on like what has worked for other games. We always use the example of the Space Marines in the mid 2000s. Like every freaking game has a Space Marine. I think the new one to me is like characters in gas masks. Like every single time I see a trailer with a character in a gas mask, I'm like, oh, it's another gas mask character. This must be a post-nuclear / post-infection world, and it's lazy, and it doesn't stand out enough. You're not going to make an icon that way, and it may serve the bare minimum of what your game is, but like you just need that unique twist to make it something different and something interesting, or you run the risk of mediocrity.
Right.
But then there's a whole nother end of the spectrum where it's like, oh, we have to design this so it has to stand out so much, and you just make these like stupid or over the top or ridiculous choices or inconsistent choices with the story or with your world that are just like, or again, you try so much to diversify the character that it ends up being like, oh, this is another character that's trying too hard. You know what I mean? And then they end up being obscure. And if the game sucks on top of that too, it's like, okay, well, you did nothing. You just contributed nothing to. And as much as I can't judge the games too much, we literally just had a developer profile on Sucker Punch, and I really have been enjoying Ghost of Tsushima. But when I look back on their back catalog of games, I feel like they fall into both extremes. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, the infamous characters don't really stand out. Neither one of them stands out too much to me. But then on the other hand, I'm like, Sly Cooper, it's like, okay, it's a sneaky raccoon. Like, and then what was their first game? The one with the little bomber dude?
Rocket.
That's
what we're talking about. That's exactly the problem.
It's
too generic.
It's a very unique looking character, but I couldn't tell you what it even is. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, it's another cartoony character that he has distinguishing features. I can picture him in my head, but it's like, okay, he just doesn't stand out at all. So,
yep, that's diversity, inclusivity, depth of characters. They all take hard work to craft these diverse and likable characters. So it does cost money. So you see these pitfalls in character design in video games. Video games are expensive to make. They take up ridiculous amounts of time. And so if you're going to weigh heavily on a good game that feels good, and you cash in on the game design itself, you probably have a better shot at making a successful game if you lack on the character. But if you lack in the character too much, it can almost be a pitfall in and of itself. And like, I use Onimusha again as an example. It's a phenomenal game. It's iconic in the logo and the design. If I saw the cover of the game without the title, I would know immediately what it is, but I have no clue who the character is, right? So like that, right? And then you have Tommy Vercetti in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, or Vice City. I've never played that game all the way through at all, but it's an iconic character. He's Italian, and he's an immigrant into Miami, and he's doing, like, I already know all this stuff without even having played the game, just by his look and character and feels. So many different examples you can pull from that highlight different aspects of fleshing out what a character is, who they are, what they say, how they act, and it all just needs to work. You have to make it cohesive, and it has to flow together in order to make a good game.
Yep, I agree. Well, I think we are out of time. We did have a couple more questions. I think we answered one of them. The other one we haven't really gotten a chance to answer. That's okay. We've probably touched on it to some degree. Anyways, either way, we are running out of time, so let's go ahead and wrap up there. So again, listeners, we will repeat where you can engage with us if you have thoughts of your own related to character design. Who do you think are the most iconic characters, and what about their design to you is iconic? On the flip side, if there are other characters that you're just like, it was a great game, but I couldn't tell you the first thing about the character, then we want to hear that as well. And what are kind of the pitfalls or lessons you've identified from that? If you think that character design is completely pointless and not worth discussing at all, we want to hear that feedback as well. So please share that with us as well. So Termite, if they want to engage with us, if they want to listen to more of our shows or listen to some of the other episodes that we mentioned in this podcast, where can they find?
Before I do that, this is the segment of our show where we read the Apple Podcast Review of the Week, where an audience member has left us a review that we will read regardless of what it says and regardless of how many stars it has. And there is nothing. So I hope I queued up an excitement in you that you wanted to hear us read these awesome reviews, whether how many stars they had and what kind of trolling they could give us.
I thought you found one. And I was like, oh, let's go look at it.
There is none. So that is up to you, audience. Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. We promise to read it on the show. We are a family-friendly show, so if you leave a vulgar review, we will censor it in our best way so that it is accessible to children's ears. But other than that, you have the opportunity to troll us, to compliment us, tell us how you feel. On Apple Pod, we are bound to read it regardless of what it says. So you can do anything you want. Just go to Apple Podcasts, look for 80-Bit Podsmash, and leave us a review, and that would be awesome. Otherwise, you can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website with all of our podcast platform links. You can find us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit, 80bit Podsmash. And you can find us on Discord. The link is in all the show notes that get posted. And you can also find us on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash. We would appreciate a follow there, as subscription, whatever you want to call it, so that you are made aware every Wednesday night at 8 when we go live. You'll know that we're there, and you can come join in on chat and interact with our community, because our community is awesome. So, thank you.
Yeah, awesome, great. Well, next week we will be doing an episode. We're going to revisit trophy hunting. So, Penguin, we did an episode on trophies a long time ago, and since then, Penguin has gotten more into trophy hunting, as our longtime listeners may have noticed. So we have some new thoughts, some new ideas that we want to discuss, and figured the topic would be worth revisiting. So we're going to be talking about that next week.
All right. That's my favorite thing to talk about in video games.
I know it is. So you'll be excited. We'll see you then.
See you next week.